Welcome back to the garage. Today I'm going to show you how to properly change a tire safely. So we're going to go step by step, taking off the front tire here on this 1986 Ford Mustang. Now it's sitting here in the garage on a flat surface on a concrete pad, so it's very easy to do. You can still use all these steps I'm going to show you, even if it's on gravel or dirt or a surface that is not level. Either way, we're going to do this safely, step by step. Okay, so to change your tire safely, here are the items I recommend you use. On the left-hand side, you're going to see a jack stand, which is adjustable in height. You will either have a floor jack or the blue scissor jack, which is actually what comes in most cars now as a standard option. A set of gloves for your hands to keep them protected. You have a flashlight there, which is a camouflage piece. You also have multiple ways to break loose and take off the lug nuts. On the bottom right, you have a breaker bar with a socket. You have the 4-way lug wrench. On the very top there, on the black, you have the standard piece that comes in the car itself. Now this is going to be a socket on one end for the lug wrench, and on the opposite side will be a pointed end to take off any hubcaps if needed, if that comes on your car. I also have as an option a impact gun there, which is the green Ryobi piece. Now that can be used to take off lug nuts and tighten them if you have available. If not, just go ahead with the manual pieces in the lug wrenches and the jacks. Now before I worry about taking the tire off or lifting the car, the first thing I want to do is make sure that this vehicle is going to stay stationary at all times through this. Now if your vehicle is an automatic, the first thing I want to make sure of is that it is in park, so the vehicle only has so much roll back and forth, and I want to engage the parking brake. Now if your vehicle is a manual transmission, you're going to want to push in the clutch, put it into A gear, and also engage the parking brake. Now also, if you have a wheel chock, you can chock the wheels to where the vehicle has no ability to roll forward or backwards. You can also use just some wood on either side of the tire, assuming it's the tire that is not the one you're taking off, but you can then block the tire in, that way the vehicle has no ability to roll. This will actually be very handy if you have to change the tire on a surface that is not level. If it's either leaning forward or back, this will help keep the vehicle, along with the parking brake and the transmission, it will keep it in a good stationary position. Now with the vehicle immobilized so it can't roll forward or backward, the next thing I want to do is be able to take off my hubcap if required in order to get onto the lug nuts. You can just use the pointing tip of your piece here, pop off the hubcaps as needed. Now the reason to do the lug nuts first prior to actually lifting the car up is the vehicle doesn't roll right now. The weight of the vehicle is actually on the tire, and it'll keep this stationary while you loosen the lug nuts. The front wheel right now, if I lifted the vehicle up, it would rotate freely. And if I didn't have an impact gun trying to loosen the lug nuts, the tire would tend to turn and actually fight against me trying to take this off. So loosen them up prior to lifting the vehicle, that way they're probably half a turn to a turn loose, and then you can lift the vehicle and thread off the lug nuts. Now finding the right placement for your jack to be able to lift the vehicle is critical on this. If you put it along the sill down here and it's not meant to hold the weight of the vehicle, you could bend the sill panels where all your metal comes together. This vehicle itself is what's called a unibody. It means the body is one complete construction, and it has a subframe that holds the engine and front suspension to the car, and it also has a rear axle underneath the rear of the car. A lot of today's SUVs, whether they're a midsize or a smaller SUV, will be the same. There'll be a unibody with subframes on both. So they'll have attachment points underneath the body itself versus right here under the fender or the door to where to lift from. Today's larger vehicles, such as a pickup truck or an SUV or some of the older, bigger cars, think of it like a Cadillac. Those actually have a frame underneath them that you can lift from. So you would lift the vehicle from underneath the frame to be able to get the tire off. So underneath the Mustang here, you can see that I'm now under the unibody piece. This is what's just called a subframe connector piece under there. And this is where I'm going to lift from. You can see the fuel rail and lines are right here, but this long metal channel runs from front to back on the car, and that's meant to lift the car up. So I can just put my floor jack under there and lift there without any worries or issues of the car not being able to support it from that piece. So I have lifted the vehicle up just enough so that there's a little bit of daylight underneath the tire so it's not touching the ground and it can spin freely. And it's just the right amount to get a jack stand safely under there to support the vehicle as I work on it. Now, if you're working on a loose surface such as gravel or dirt, you may find it necessary to put something like a piece of 2x6 or 2x4 underneath the jack and or the jack stands. This will give you the ability to put the vehicle on a solid surface, and you don't have to worry about it actually falling inside the dirt, and it will give you enough that you could support a complete vehicle safely on pieces of wood as you need to work. All right, with the vehicle safely supported up on a jack stand, I've also left the jack there as I will need to take the vehicle out, but it also gives an extra layer of support for the vehicle. This is why we always loosen the lug nuts while the tire is on the ground, is as I go to turn it, the tire will spin if it's a front tire without connection to the parking brake or anything else. Now you should be able to use your fingers to take off all the lug nuts. Once you have them all off, you can just set them aside because you will need them shortly. Don't lose track of them. Now, when I take the tire off, I want to have safety in mind, so I don't want to keep my hand on the top or the bottom. If this car, for any reason, were to roll forward or backward and fall, let's say, off the jack stand or off the jack if you're on the side of the road, the fender could come down and actually catch my hand between the fender and the tire. So I want to keep my hands on the sides. That way, as I take the tire off, you just wiggle it, it'll come off, and there's no chance of me actually catching my hand between the fender and the tire. We're going to put the temporary spare or the mini spare or the donut back on the car. Now, one thing to keep in mind on these is that they should only be installed and run on the non-drive axles of the vehicle. So this car itself is a rear-wheel drive vehicle, so this temporary spare can be run on the front safely, but not the rears. In the case that if I had to change the rear tire on this, I should take off one of the fronts, which is a full size, add it in replacement of the rear, and then put the temporary spare in place of the front. If it was an all-wheel drive car, well, since both of them are drive axles, you'll most likely have a full-size spare to change to. That way, it doesn't have to worry about if I have a donut or the temporary one to go on either case. But in this case, since we're changing a front tire, the temporary spare can go on the front safely. Now, the installation of the tire is going to be the opposite of the removal. So again, I'm going to hold it from the sides, never from the top and the bottom. I'm going to place it up on to the axle, slide it over till it touches, and then I'm going to loosely install the lug nuts by finger tight all the way until it touches and holds the wheel to the hub itself. Once all the lug nuts are finger tight, you can try to rock the tire back and forth, and if it doesn't move side to side or up and down, you know that it's good. It's nice and tight to there. You can double check with your fingers. At this point, you can now let down the vehicle onto the weight of the tire and use either your four-way spanner or your four-way lug wrench to tighten the lug nuts down. And now with the weight of the vehicle on the tire, you can tighten these down. And again, you're going to want to do this as a cross pattern. So if it's a 4 lug, just go this way, then this way. If it's a 5, you'll do it as a star, always going opposite of each other. And now when your lug are fully tight, from there, if you're on the emergency side road, you can at least drive it to a service station to get your tire fixed. Maybe you had a blowout or a flat, or you just need to swap it out and temporarily drive on your temporary spare. Now when it's time to put the full-size permanent tire back on, the process is going to be the same. We're going to put it in park or in gear. We'll engage the parking brake. We will chock the wheels. That's going to keep the vehicle stationary and make sure it doesn't roll back and forth on us. We're going to loosen our lug nuts while the tire is on the ground. We will lift and support the vehicle as needed. We will take the lug nuts off, take the tire off, put the permanent one back on. Hand tight with the lug nuts going all the way back on to make sure it's tight to the hub. We'll then lift the vehicle, take out the jack stand support, lower it to the ground. We will then double check our tightness on the lugs. So I would always recommend using a torque wrench to the manufacturer's specification in the correct pattern. So on a 4 lug, again, it's going to be a cross. On a 5 lug, it'll be a star. On a 6 plus, again, it'll just be continually going opposite, just to continually torque it down to the manufacturer's specification. And at that point, you can just put your hubcap back on if you took it off in order to get your tire off. And that's pretty much it. Pretty easy to do. Just remember, safety is the key through all of this. Support the vehicle from rolling, support it from falling, and never put your hand between the tire and the fender or the tire and the ground as you're taking the tire off and putting it on. If you like these tips and you want to see more, be sure to subscribe to us here on the Way.com YouTube channel. Follow us on Instagram at way.com_ and on TikTok at way.com. We'll see you next time.